All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for being here for our presentation on SAC-RT's comprehensive operational analysis. Just as a couple housekeeping items, um, if you're trying to enter things into the chat, we've intentionally disabled the chat on this, but the Q&A feature does work. We're going to hold questions until the end, but you're welcome to enter them at any time. With that, I'll get going. Welcome everyone again. My name is James Drake. I'm Senior Manager of Service Planning for Sacramento Regional Transit and Project Manager for this comprehensive operational analysis. And it's a pleasure to see a nice turnout here, folks filing in. And I'd like to recognize too, especially it's good to see some of our partners from the city of Sacramento, from the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, from our own Mobility Advisory Council, as well as our folks from the Amalgamated Transit Union 256, who represent our frontline folks operating buses and trains, assisting customers on light rail, and answering phones. So it's great to see a nice turnout. And before we get into the presentation, I'll add that I'll be joined today by Mr. Thomas Whitman of Nelson Nygaard, who is the PM on our consulting team. We'll be talking about the project overview in a few minutes here. But in a nutshell, we think we have a nice combination of both in-house expertise, some people with some good experience here in Sacramento and knowledge of the system, but we think we've complemented that nicely with some expertise from Thomas and his team at Nelson Nygaard to give us a little perspective, a little independent outside perspective. Thomas and his team do projects like this all over the country, and they've already been getting very busy, both on the data analysis side and doing a lot of focus groups with our key staff. But before we dive into the presentation, I want to next pass the mic over to our General Manager and CEO, Mr. Henry Lee, to get us started with some opening remarks here. Henry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, James. And it's so great to see so many partners and friends in this webinar. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm Henry Lee, General Manager, CEO of SAC-RT, and so happy to welcome you to join this virtual meeting on SAC-RT's comprehensive operational analysis, or COA. This COA provides opportunity to take a fresh look at our service offerings and will culminate in an update of both SAC-RT's short-range transit plan and long-range transit plan. We hope to use the COA to achieve physical sustainability without major service impact or fare increases, and to assess travel patterns post-COVID and also post-annexations of multiple transit systems in the region starting from 2019. As you know, starting from 2019, SAC-RT annexed several small transit systems from some cities and partner agencies. And as such, far-reaching project, stakeholders engagement always imperative to ensure this is a successful process. So I want to thank everyone for participating today. We want to better understand how our riders use our transit network, and then what opportunities might exist to make people's lives better and easier through public transit. The COA is envisioned as a physically constrained exercise, but I would be remiss if I did not point out that Sakati receives approximately 5 times less in local funding support than many of our West Coast transit peers, as you can see, in this chart, in this screen. The amount of local funding directly impacts the amount of service and the coverage we can operate, and certainly hurts our ability to leverage more federal and state funding. However, even with limited local funding, we have been highly successful in securing over $1 billion historical federal and state funding in last several years, and with the support of our partner agencies and other organizations, and also by focusing on efficiency, return on investment, and public safety. And the screen show what we something we did, some examples of our achievements. And this presentation actually was shared with Federal Transit Administration top officials and White House Intergovernmental Affairs Office. So I want to share with you, you guys here. And we did these meetings, 2 meetings during the Capital Cap, when several Sakati board members and staff secured great opportunities to meet with FTA and White House teams separately. And very excitingly, we received extremely positive feedback. Let's just touch base a little bit on this. So Sakati has been focused on efficiency, safety and security, promoting families and economic prosperities for this region. And as the largest multimodal transit provider and accounting for about 90% of the total public transit agencies ridership in the capital region, and we provide service for over 1.6 million population in this region. And on the chart 2, you see that small yellow label 1, 2, 3. On the chart 2, we are one of very few large transit agencies in the industry implemented the Students Ride Free program starting from 2019. And the total free or reduced fare for over 450,000 students. And in 2025, the ridership from students is about 6 million. And you can imagine what we did, how significantly the impact on families. The parents do not have to spend time to take kids to the schools or take them back. And the congestions got relieved. And we're developing future riders. So on the chart 3, as you can see, our capital investment are driving U.S. Economic growth. The reason we say that is because our products, we purchase products or buses or parts or other stuff from over 15 states. And from both red or blue states, we're truly driving the U.S. Economic growth with billions of capital investments. Let's move to the next slide, James. So as you can see, we're leading in efficiency compared to our peers. On the left side in the chart 4, Sakati's expenses per bus hold on one second, is for the it's per mile is less than $17. But look at the top 10 agencies in other, urbanized areas in California, the average cost is $22.3. That is close over 25%. So we are 25% of more efficient compared to our peers in the California. And also compared to the light rail, the cost per mile, Sakati occurred $23, and our peers, other 4 light rail operators in California, is $27. That is close to 20% less or more efficient Sakati. So we're trying everything possible, use innovations, AI and other stuff to do more with less. And then if you look at our chart 5, the crime and fear evasion prevention, we implemented lots of industry leading edge innovative initiatives, such as installed over 1,500 live feed cameras and use PA system to deter the potential crime and fear evasion. When we say PA system, is we have the security operational center staff watching those cameras across the region. When the cameras catch some perpetrators or some people doing some bad things, such as in the light rail station, when people smoke stuff, then our staff from the security operational center speak to these people directly through the public address system, then ask them to stop doing whatever they're not supposed to do. The effectiveness of this system is about 99%. The people who are doing the things they're not supposed to do, once through the PA system, we warned them they're not supposed to do, otherwise, police is coming, so they stopped. And we industry called this as the voice of the God. And as a result of that, we over 2 dozens of transit agencies come to us to learn this. And we have 10% of Sakati staff focus on safety and fear evasion with AI technology, and since about 9 years ago. Our crime and fear evasion rates are among the lowest in the industry. As a result, we have won national top awards in the last 7 years. And as a result of the leading industry efficiency, effective safety and security procedures and other initiatives, we truly restored public trust. And as a result of that, we were able to annex 5 transit systems into Sakati system, and Sakati ranked most trustworthy public entities in only 2 times in last 8 years. Only 2 times this region did this survey, which when we did 2020 and 2022, when this region did potential transportation sales tax measures. So they put a polls or survey out to find out, out all public entities who will receive or would receive the fundings from the the sales tax measure for transportation, and both time we were ranked the first, the number one. So do you have another slide, James? James?
Yes, sir. I just advanced it to 7, 8,
Okay.
9.
Okay. So very quickly, just we have some major capital projects, over 100 capital projects in a $2 billion FY25 budget, which actually $1.3 billion funded. And our light rail modernization is probably the largest capital project in SACART's 51-year history. And the light rail modernization and expansion project cost about $790 million. And our downtown riverfront streetcar, FTA just informed us they put our project into this incoming year's budget. And we're working with our partner agencies like City of Sac, SACOG, and others on major BRT initiatives. The first one is Bus Rapid Transit, BRT, in Stockton Boulevard. Then a little bit more about streetcar, downtown streetcar, which actually is an extension of light rail. It's not really streetcar anymore. It's a light rail because the track, the car, the train, everything will be the same. And we secured about $120 million from state and federal, and we are about to secure another $36 million federal money. And as you guys probably saw news from yesterday, federal new budget, proposed budget, actually did not decrease transit funding. Instead, actually it increased a little bit, 1 or 2%. And we're very excited about the streetcar, downtown, or the light rail extension to West Sacramento, which will be the first step for SACRT to connect. Our system connects to a lot of neighboring counties system. So with all of that being said, SACRT's business or service truly is fostering economic prosperity for this region and serve major entertainment and sports venues and support top job industries in the region, primarily for the healthcare, 100,000 plus people, and technology, close to 90,000 jobs. With that, again, I just want to thank everybody for participating on this, and we want to listen to you, and we will take you feedback, input seriously into our next step. With that, back to you, James.
All right. Well, thank you, Henry. So next, I'll be giving a little overview of the project. And when we're done with that, we're going to bring it back for a little interactivity. You, the attendees, will get to take part in sort of an interactive game all about transit funding. But to jump into the project here, I'm going to start with some headlines. If you've been following the news about transit, not just here in Sacramento, but elsewhere in California, across the country, you may have seen some grim headlines. Transit agencies have been facing some challenges. Revenues have been down. We get a lot of our revenues from fares, and the pandemic has had an effect on that. Inflation has been up. That affects our projects. It affects our cost of living. That affects demand for higher wages. So, it hasn't made things easy for transit agencies, and we do think here in Sacramento that we may be in a little better shape than some of our peers down the road. But by no means does that mean we're immune from some of these challenges. It may just mean that we have a little more time to plan and prepare. And we think we're a little different from our peers in that way, in maybe a good way. But as Henry mentioned, there's an important difference between us and some of our peer agencies in that we really don't get as much local sales tax funding as most of the comparable peers here in California at other large agencies. But that's really the backdrop for our project here. So the COA, the Comprehensive Operational Analysis, in a nutshell, really kind of has two main tracks. It's an update to our short-range transit plan and an update to our long-range transit plan. In terms of timeline, it's about a one-year project, and this is our first public meeting on it, but we've been going since earlier this year, kind of doing preparation and background work. I'll talk first about the short-range plan, and my first bullet point on this is really about SB 125, Senate Bill 125. This is some very important legislation here in California for transit. This has provided some one-time money to help out transit agencies, like our peers in SoCal and the Bay Area, like ourselves. They give us some one-time money to ease the burden and give us some time to plan and prepare and avoid an abrupt fiscal cliff. We've seen plans for major fare increases at AC Transit in Oakland and for major service cuts in San Francisco, and we want to try to avoid that. And the state has tried to give us some money to help ease that burden and plan and prepare. The other thing that Henry touched on is there have been a lot of changes here at SAC-RT in the last 5+ years, not just the pandemic, but Elk Grove's independent transit systems become a part of SAC-RT. Our paratransit operations have likewise been brought in-house, and it's now called SAC-RT Go. So there's a big need to just do some kind of organizational streamlining and normalization from some of those big changes. Changing gears to our long-range plan, this is more of a scenario type plan where we do scenario A, scenario B. One of these is going to have to be sort of a worst case scenario where if revenues continue to trend same or worse and costs continue to grow, we may very well need to make some pretty hard choices. For the short range plan, it's a plan where there's no budget for expansion, but we don't intend for it to be a major service cut. But in our long range plan, we will definitely need to take on some of those hard questions. If we don't have an improvement in our revenues and cost trends, what would we do? But then what we also are doing, one of our scenarios will also be an expansion plan, and this would be in the event of a new funding measure. If we were to get new local support in the form of a new local sales tax or something comparable to that to make us more like our peers, what would we do? We need that to help out with existing budget problems, but if we were to get that, we also have some money to do some new things. And we'll be talking about a lot of that stuff later in the presentation when we get to the interactive funding part. But there's three things I really want to emphasize here. What we want to do is, we here in planning, we do scenarios, we do preparations and contingencies. What we want, we don't know if there will be a local funding measure on the ballot, but we want to be prepared in that event to have a plan that is technically sound, financially realistic, and most importantly, publicly supported, where we can say, hey, if the voters of Sacramento County wanted to send more money to regional transit, we know exactly what we could do with it. We have this plan. So that's why we've invited you all here and brought on our consulting team to make that a sound and supported plan. So a little more detail on that short-range transit plan. One of the things we always do in a plan like this is it's an update to our routes and schedules. We want to match and improve how our service meets today's travel patterns, which do of course change, which changed a lot with the pandemic. Methodologically, we use a combination of data, quantitative things like our own ridership stats, as well as cell phone data to know about travel patterns by people who aren't taking transit today. We always couple that with real world observations. We and our team get out and ride the buses. We talk to our operators. We do focus groups with our supervisors, and we have events like this where we take your comments, and we review our complaints as well, our everyday complaints and requests for service. We talk to our customer service folks about what they hear. We know a few focuses for this. Commuter bus routes in particular, demand for those has changed a lot. Elk Grove has a transit network that was developed independently of SAC-RT. We want to make sure that's fully integrated and is logical and cohesive with the rest of the SAC-RT network without necessarily totally upending that network. We know that Natomas is one of our areas that has pretty considerable gaps in coverage. And there are a few other areas we're looking at as well. Without jumping to any conclusions, one we hear about a lot is Delta Shores. And, one thing I have to mention on this slide, though, is for sure this is not an expansion plan. As the headlines indicated, as I shared, we're not in a budget situation where we're expanding this short-range transit plan. The purpose here is to streamline service, to find ways to do things more efficiently, and to make minor adjustments where we can to try to get service to new areas without an increase to the budget. So for sure, this is not a blank slate or new network redesign of the system. This is more of a minor adjustment approach to things, and it does need to be cost neutral or a net savings. The second part of that short-range transit plan that I alluded to is to really look at how we're doing things and how to do it more economically to become more operationally efficient. I'll start off with SAC-RT Flex, which is our microtransit service. This launched in January. Prior to this year, we ran Smart Ride, as many of you have ridden. SAC-RT Flex arose as kind of a new transition of that former Smart Ride microtransit, really because we were not financially able to sustain the former program. SAC-RT Flex is a little scaled down. It's limited to disadvantaged persons. We limit it to seniors, disabled, and low income, whereas our Smart Ride microtransit was open to the general public. A lot of people miss our former Smart Ride service, but it's important to know this helped us save $7 million. This probably helped us avoid major service reductions or fare increases to the full-size bus system and the light rail system. Likewise, we brought our paratransit service, SAC-RT Go, in-house about 5 years ago. We want to take a look at that, how that's doing, how that's performing. We want to look again at our service standards. These answer questions like, what areas have enough population density to support transit? And what kind of routes, both existing routes and new planned routes, how cost effective do they need to be to compete for grants? And I'll say, this isn't something where we really want to reinvent the wheel here. There's a lot of ways we can sort of plagiarize others' work. The federal government, the FTA, they have standards for cost effectiveness. If you want to compete well for projects or large grants for new light rail and bus rapid transit, you need to hit these standards for cost effectiveness. So some of what we're planning on doing is just taking some of those standards that already exist in the FTA and better incorporating them in our own design standards. We think it makes sense. And the last bullet point here, pursue more sponsorships and matching funds. There's a photo here of the Causeway Connection bus. And I noticed we have our partners with UC Davis Health on the line, who we love working with, who've helped us to fund new routes and new service that every day is getting cars off the road and helping people get to their work at the UC Davis Medical Center, both from Davis on the Causeway Connection bus, as well as from Elk Grove on our Route 137. And I have a photo here of our ride-free RT pass for youth. Henry mentioned, I think this has been one of the most successful free ride programs in the country on transit. And it really wouldn't have happened here without partnership and sponsorship from the city of Sacramento, from our school districts and our partners. So that's the kind of thing we want to do more of in a tough budget time to help keep the service we have on the street out there and even get more. Change gears a little bit to our long-range plan. You know, a big thing we'll be doing on this is reviewing our existing plans. You know, just to itemize a few, a lot of them are pretty well known, but light rail to the airport, light rail to Elk Grove, the downtown streetcar that Henry mentioned. Bus rapid transit is more kind of a new thing here in Sacramento. We are underway right now working with City of Sacramento and Sacramento County, planning our first bus rapid transit route on Stockton Boulevard and Broadway. And I mentioned here the SACOG Blueprint, our partners at the Sacramento Area Council of Government. They do all the long-range planning for the whole four-county region for not just transit, but transportation. And so we're working with them. Pleased to have them on the line, pleased to have them as project partners to help make sure our long-range plan fits in with the region. A few key questions we'll ask in this process. You know, what do these projects cost? What are their ridership forecasts? And then putting aside the financials and the technical stuff, where's the public support? What do people want? What if people said they want the most, and what are they most willing to spend their money on, which is something we'll talk about in our game pretty soon here. What else do we want to look at? Competitiveness for state and federal grants. I mentioned earlier those service standards. Is this a project that can stack up to get money? And local funding support. I'll call out, for example, both the streetcar in West Sacramento, as well as potentially light rail to Elk Grove, where we may potentially have partners there that can help bring additional funds, both for the one-time capital costs and for the ongoing operating and maintenance costs. Methodologically, how we do this long-range plan. A lot of this is financial modeling. So we're looking at those revenue forecasts. We're taking inventory of our existing projects, looking at their costs, both operating and capital costs, one-time capital costs. We're looking at their performance, their ridership, and that cost effectiveness. And then the last bullet point here before we get to our game, prioritization. This is the last big thing to hit on the long-range plan. There's a lot of big choices to make, a lot of trade-offs with anything. Where do we stack in importance maintenance of the existing system versus expansion? How do we feel about different modes of transportation, whether it's buses or light rail, microtransit, or bus rapid transit? Geographically, frequency versus coverage. Should we put our resources in the dense central areas where we get the most ridership? Should we focus on the gap areas where we don't have any service today? Geographical balance. You know, we're a district made up of both urban and suburban jurisdictions. If we were going to go strictly for maximizing our ridership, we'd probably put all our service in the downtown in the central city. But we get support, we get taxes through sales tax, gas tax from our entire jurisdiction. And that definitely includes the suburban and peripheral areas where ridership may not be as strong, but where they help pay into the system. So we need to balance out how we distribute that service. Equity in disadvantaged communities is hugely important to us. It's part of federal law. It's part of a lot of grants. It's also just the right thing to do. And in transit, really, we're fortunate that most transit projects that seek to maximize ridership, that seek to have a good cost per passenger, it tends to correlate very strongly with our equity goals and serving disadvantaged communities. We tend to have three major markets, students and commuters, but also transit dependent. They're a huge portion of what we do is helping people get around who may not have another way to get around. The last bullet point here, last but not least, is public input. There's no right answer to how you prioritize these things, but we definitely want to hear from you all because we need that public input to make this something that's supported. So we're going to jump very shortly, and this is something that folks can play along at home. with on your mobile phone. If you're watching this on a desktop computer, you can play along with your phone. If you're watching this on your phone, you'll still be able to play along on your phone. You may just have to switch over to your browser. But our game here is all about limited resources. You're going to have some money. You're going to be able to pick some projects, but you're not going to have enough money to pick all of them. And we're going to find out as a group what everybody thought was the highest priority project. And I have one qualifier here. This is only a game. People always want to know, how realistic are these dollar amounts? You know, we've tried to bring a little bit of realism to this, but it is only a game. So I'm going to go through, we've got 16 projects here that you'll be able to spend your $100 budget on. First, in the blue category, we have bus and light rail, or light rail and bus rapid transit expansion. So, you know, light rail, I think everybody knows. Bus rapid transit, if you don't know it, it's kind of like a rubber-tired bus version of light rail. Light rail style stations, oftentimes a dedicated lane, but just a 40-foot or a 60-foot bus rather than a multi-car train. It costs a lot less to build than light rail, so there's trade-offs there. In the orange category, we have kind of plain old bus service. So at the low end, for just $1 out of that $100 budget, this would just add late night bus service to our 20 busiest routes till at least 11 p.m. For a little more money at $10, we could expand bus service to some areas that we don't already serve, or add weekend service to areas that don't currently have it. And then more at the higher end, for $15, we could take our top 8 busiest bus routes and bump them up to 15-minute headways to kind of big city frequent service. And for $35, we could have a bus rapid transit network, creating a grid for a whole city to really help people get around in a regional way. In the red here, we have some maintenance projects. At the low end, $1, just for minor workaday improvements to bus stops, better shelters, repaving. Mobility hubs for $5, $15 for zero emission fleet, which is an important thing because there's a law here in California that all transit agencies actually do have to upgrade their fleets to zero emission. And last, $35, big ticket item, but this is an important thing. This represents system and facility maintenance. So, you know, right now we're using some of that state money, SB 125, to help us with our budget. When that money runs out, current projections have us needing to use some of the money that normally is flexible that we get from the federal government, that we normally spend for fleet, for buses, for rail, for upgrading the system. We have to take some of that flexible money and use it to cover operation. So $35 here, big ticket item, but it's very important. It would help refund that expenditure there. And last, for $2, our popular student free fare program, Ride Free RT. $5 to maintain our existing SAC RT Flex system and maybe augment it and enhance it a little bit. $5 to augment existing security. And lastly, $30. This really represents, again, kind of like the prior item, this is something we sort of need to do. This is $30 just to maintain existing service. So to avoid those fare increases and service cuts that other agencies have had to do, this is something we kind of need to do. We've kind of mixed things we sort of need to do in with things we'd like to do here. This is an educational purpose, right? But we're going to jump now to that game, and I'm going to show on my screen here. You're going to get a QR code. And those of you who are watching this on a desktop but have a cell phone, if you use the photo on your cell phone and view that QR code on the bottom left of the screen, that will take you to the interactive game on your phone. If you're watching this presentation on your phone, you can also participate. You'll need to change over to your browser. You'll still be able to hear my voice and toggle back to our presentation here, but you'll need to change over to your browser and you'll go to menti.com. That's MENTI.com. And it'll ask you for a numerical code. You can see this on the top of the screen here, but it's an 8-digit code, 51205799. And I'll repeat that in a minute here. I see we have 20 people logged in already participating. I'm glad it's working for folks. To explain the game a little more, the 16 projects that I described briefly, we're asking folks to rank them in order. So number 1 would be their highest priority project, whatever you think is the best project for the money. We're asking folks to choose their top 8 projects. I mentioned there's a budget of 100, but that doesn't really matter for individual participants. Participants can just pick their top 8. If you want to just do your top 5 or your top 1 project, that's fine. If you want to do all 16, that's fine. But what we really want to get here is what the priority is collectively for the group. Pause here briefly. You can see that some results are beginning to come in, and with just 5 results in, it looks like we have an early front runner for that frequent 15-minute bus service. So again, on that app, if you just click one of the options, it will add it to your list. If you want to reshuffle your list, you can press the up and down arrows to change the order. Whatever project you think is the best project for the money, move it up to the top. And it really doesn't matter how many you do. We're just trying to get a large sample of what people's top priorities are. And as these projects come in and we start to see what shuffles to the top, then we'll make a list here. I'm going to preview that. We're going to be adding those projects as they come into our budget sheet here. And we'll see how many of those we can afford for that $100 budget. And to bring it back for any folks who may have missed how to do it through your browser, if you are tuning into this webinar on your cell phone, you can change to a browser and go to menti.com. That's MENTI.com and enter the 8-digit code 51205799. And I'll also add that in speaking with our team earlier today about this exercise, it occurred to us that some folks may not be able to participate today, may have technical difficulties. Some folks may participate, enjoy this, but want to share this with friends. We decided it might be nice to have a version of this that people can do on their own after our webinar today. So we'll be following up after this webinar with a link. If you didn't get to, or you want to share this with a friend so they can put in their choices, we'll send you a link to a game where you can do this on your own at our website, sacrt.com. And I'm seeing that we're starting to get a kind of a critical mass here, 19 completed. So I'm going to start filling in the budget here. People can continue to do this. And even after we finish talking about this, feel free to complete your surveys. We'll keep all those results. Number 1 project thus far is looking to be that 15-minute frequent bus service. So I'm going to check that. And our sheet here shows that costs $15 of our $100, which means we've got $85 left. Our next project here, $1 to upgrade bus stops and shelters. I'm going to check that. Adds another $1 to our total, 16 total. Looks like our next one is $30, maintain existing service. Check that. We're now at 46 expended, 54 remaining. It looks like preference number 4 is those $2 student free fares, followed by $35 for that bus rapid transit network. We're now at $83, $17 left. For $1, it looks like we can definitely afford that late night bus and rail service. And then we've got $10 to expand that bus coverage down to $6, which is just about enough to cover $5 for enhanced safety and security. And I want to jump in here too to say, like I said, the dollar amounts here, we tried to have some realism to these, but like we said, it's only a game. So it's not that preferences here we're going to use as the only factor for how we decide things. But we find it's kind of a fun way to get input and facilitate discussion a little bit. If you are still filling that out, we are going to move on to the next slide here briefly, but I will comment first. Let's take a look at what didn't make it. So we really didn't have any here on BRT or light rail. Were kind of higher priced items. The zero emission fleet didn't quite make it, although, like I said, that's something we'll probably have to do anyway. So, like I said, it's kind of a game. Some of that budget may end up needing to be expended on that. The next question, though, is actually going to touch on which projects you didn't see on the list that you would have. So I'm going to advance this slide. And apologies to anyone that I cut off on the previous question. But we're going to go to Q&A here pretty soon. But before we do, follow-up question. Similarly, likewise, back on your phone, this is just a free response. You can do up to 3 responses. But any projects or priorities for SAC-RT that you didn't see on that list of 16 that you think should have been on there, type them in, hit enter, they'll show up on the screen. The ones that people say the most will be the biggest words. I see 33 people are logged in. And we've got number 1, the bus stop voice of God. Love it. Love it. We've got signage, rail live tracking. So kind of a common theme here with passenger information. I guess they all fall under passenger information. And a transit center really kind of falls under, you know, kind of a little bit under a similar setting of, broadly speaking, passenger environment. Looks like another vote for live rail tracking. I see weekends on there, which of course was sort of one of the options. Well, I guess late night was an option, but weekends wasn't. So actually, I love that. Bike parking, live LRT, I think kind of sounds like live real time for the trains. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that real time for the trains is something we're working on right now. Those of you who've been riding for a long time know it's something we've been working on on and off for quite a while now. As Henry and I both alluded to here at SAC-RT, we try to do what we can with the resources we have. It's been a little while getting that real time rolled out, but it's something we're working on. And along with that, you know, our customers often see the customer facing side of real time or lack of it. But the same goes for our own supervisors who manage the trains every day. They also have, you know, very limited technology and tools for managing those trains. And for what they have, they do a tremendous job. But that's a project that's maybe not as visible, but they are behind the scenes and related to that real time. I see Truxell Bridge Station, bus shelters, regional ticketing, Green Line extension. These keep coming in. I think at this point, I'm not going to close this question, but I think I am going to change over. I'm going to keep this open. We can change back to this, but I want to jump to another little announcement to close up our session here. If you enjoyed this game, or if you'd like to take part in this in person or get others involved, if you think this is important, which I think this is important, we'd love to invite you to one of 3 upcoming workshops. This is under the header of our Transit Idea Exchange. This is a project that's not part of our COA, but it's very closely related. It's a little more focused on collecting that public opinion and attitudes, preferences. Our COA project is a little more focused on design and budget, but we're working with our friends and colleagues in SAC-RT marketing, communications, and community affairs to put on some additional workshops. We're using that input, including the results of this game in person, to help inform our COA. So there's 3 workshops scheduled. All of them will be in person. We're in Carmichael, South Sacramento, and Citrus Heights. We also will be in Elk Grove. That date hasn't been firmed up yet, but we'll be in Elk Grove. If you want to check back for these dates and times, you can visit us at sacrt.com/transit workshops. And those will be in person. They're a lot of fun. We'd love to see a good turnout there and work more with our customers and our stakeholders. I'm going to turn back here to see any other additional things that have been added here. And I think before we go to Q&A, I'll pause here and pass the mic over to Thomas, just to kind of reflect a little bit on what we saw on these priorities, as well as on the list, as well as kind of initial reactions, just as our independent consultant. Thomas, go ahead.
Hey, no, thank you so much. I think it's really cool seeing how some of the results from the game came out. This is really one of the things as we look at what some of the long range options are, what are some of the options for improving mobility in Sacramento and the surrounding regions. Some of the same choices you write here, it's a little bit simplified as a part of the game, are the choices that we're going to be making as a part of this process. What's the most important? What gives us the most bang for the buck? What investment strategies truly move the needle in terms of customer satisfaction, as well as that very important piece of how are we going to put something out there that folks are actually going to use and that is going to be utilized? I found it interesting to see that some of the top choices were focusing on both amenities for customers. It wasn't just where service was going to and from, but it was how do I make myself comfortable here? And how do I ensure I have a higher, a first-class experience if I'm going to be using SAC-RT? But the other thing that really stood out to me was like frequency. Convenience for folks is what, was by far the first choice, for folks, or the one that was voted on the most. And it is one of the priorities. And that's one of the things when we talk to customers, take a look back at some customer comments. Frequency is almost always one of the things that is mentioned as a part of that. So that fits in with this. I think some of the other things that stood out to me was, where light rail to the airport or bus rapid transit to the airport or to Elk Grove, were. So this is another one of these things as we look at balancing investments that work for the region. We're going to have to take into account, not, this and, multiple viewpoints with this. So it's super exciting for me to see the message that comes out of this. And I'm excited to answer try to answer some of the questions that y'all have moving forward as well.
With that, thank you, Thomas. I think I'm going to change to our last slide here. Just to wrap things up, little contact information. You can reach me personally. You can join our mailing list, which we'd love. And to recap here on the timeline, it is about a 1-year project. The next time we come out to the public will be later this summer, where we'll be giving our draft recommendations, where they'll have actual recommendations to review. We'll be finalizing that in fall. And in parallel, we'll be working up that long-range plan. So after that draft short-range plan goes out, we'll change gears to working up that long-range plan, which we hope to wrap up at the end of the year, early next year. And with that, I think I'm going to go to questions. I think I'm going to start with a few of the typed questions in the Q&A section, and then we can maybe go to folks who have their hands raised for voice questions. First question I see here, I'm going to, this is from Jim. Should SAC-RT be focusing so much on commuters as the main users of the system when the timings and accessibility of routes highly limits the types of jobs people can take and their likelihood to use SAC-RT? Why wouldn't the transit-dependent riders take priority? Improving the system for daily casual riders and those looking to use transit to get to events seems like an unexplored modification. I think I find that when I review comments from customers, a lot of times I think we have a lot of state worker customers, and a lot of the state workers seem to think that the system is designed only around moving the transit dependent. And then the people who aren't state workers seem to think the system is designed only around state workers. The answer is kind of both are wrong, or they're both right. We really try to design, it's a mass transit system. What's really hard for us to do is serve people who are going all over the place. We're really designed, if you're going to put a 40-foot bus or a light rail train out there, it really needs to be a heavy travel pattern. Back in the day, most people went downtown. Nowadays, there's a lot more demand for crosstown travel, suburb to suburb travel. We try to strike a balance with that. As I mentioned, we get funds not just from the core city, but from our suburbs. So we try to strike a balance and have something for all our member jurisdictions. And likewise, we try to strike a balance between those transit dependent riders and our commuters. And that's to say nothing of our students, who are probably like a third of our ridership when you get down to it. And Thomas, it looked like you wanted to jump in on that.
I also wanted to add to this, we have looked at what some of the regional travel patterns are for both users of SAC-RT as well as non-users. And so the travel market in Sacramento, based on our analysis, looks a lot like what we've seen all across the country, which is a de-emphasis on the peak commuting times, the morning commute in particular. The afternoon is a little bit different. It's still, there's still a higher peak, but travel patterns have changed since COVID. And you haven't seen the full impacts of it again with the state office return to work, coming in a month, I believe, or right around there. But the fact of the matter is, some of the commuting patterns have changed. And so we are looking, as a part of this process, how to adjust some of the commute type services, or the frequency on some of the routes, to adjust today's travel realities.
I see another question here from Jesus. Thanks for everyone working in these to answer these. It seems like SAC-RT's ideal customer is someone who needs to get from point A to B in a reliable, clean, safe manner. I'll say amen to that. Does SAC-RT plan on making their services seem better than personal transportation? Does SAC-RT ever plan to make the public transit service a more viable option than private transportation? I'll comment there a little bit. Kind of like on the previous question, I don't think we aspire to be the mode of transportation for every person. I think that's an important part of us being cost effective, being good stewards of our public funds. Even compared to other forms of public transportation, like a taxi cab or even an Uber, we don't want to compete against taxi cabs or Uber for every form of transportation. We want to be in the mass transit markets. There is, however they do it, whether it's because they're very efficient or because they cut corners on cost, Uber can be a very cost-effective way to do what it does. But, I can tell you for a fact, there is no way for an Uber to move more than 3, 4, maybe 5 people per hour. We can put a 40-foot bus on Broadway and we can move 40 people per hour. And it costs a little more to move a bus, a 40-foot bus, and pay someone a living wage. But when you're picking up 40 people an hour, we can do it more cost effectively. So I think we want to focus on markets where we can be successful and use our money responsibly. Question from Joe, minor one here. Is Pinnell Center supposed to be Pinnell Center spelled with an A? Yeah, good catch. Thank you, Joe. Apologies. Question from Robert. I see here, how is RT going to get the word out to people to support a sales tax in the future? Great question. I think all I'll say at this point is our project here, public agencies were really not allowed to go lobby. We don't go to the state and say, give us more money. I mean, we work with our assembly members and our Senate members for bills to help us out. But we're not really allowed to directly go lobby on our own behalf. What we do on this project is we plan and prepare. We want to be ready. Like I said, we want a plan. I'll give you, for instance, in Seattle, they had a thing called Sound Transit, where they did a plan and they said, hey, this is how much it will cost. We want to do light rail to SeaTac Airport and up to University of Washington. Here's where it would go. Here's when it would run. Here's what it would cost. They did the planning, the preparation, and they gave that. When they went for a funding measure, they said, if you vote yes on this, you'll get this plan. Same thing in Denver, Fast Tracks. We want to come out of this with a name recognition plan. At the end of the day, SAC-RT will do the best with what we have, whether it's a little money or a lot. We'd much rather have a lot, but we'll do the best with what we can. Question here from Joe, why isn't there a workshop in the Central City area of Sacramento? Apologies, you may have missed the note. Actually, the first of these transit idea exchanges was a week ago today, and it was here in downtown. So apologies if you missed that, but I'm glad you're able to tune in and hopefully participate today, Joe. Question from Ramon. It strikes me that moving 30 people currently in a CNG bus to 30 people in an electric bus probably isn't an efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Instead, wouldn't the funds required to transition the fleet to electric vehicles be better used with an expanded system that then would convince more people to get out of their cars and onto buses? Is there any effort out there to suspend the California mandate to transition to ZEV buses for this reason? This one is a little out of my wheelhouse, I have to confess, but for background, yes, there is a rule here in California under the Air Resources Board that all transit agencies have to transition to zero emission within, several years. There's a transition over about a decade. Our buses are mostly fueled with CNG, compressed natural gas. It's not considered zero emission fuel. Zero emission really means battery electric or hydrogen. And I wouldn't quarrel, Ramon, with some of your comments that, it maybe isn't buses that are putting the most greenhouse gases out in the air. We're a very small fragment of vehicles on the road. And when we're out there, we usually have a lot of people on our buses. Not always, but sometimes those buses are pretty full. I'll share that for sure. We're not alone among transit agencies in California here, struggling a little bit with that mandate. Battery electric buses, it's still at this point, so it's still a fairly experimental or at least emerging technology. They don't get the same range that traditional natural gas or diesel buses get, which means the bus may not be able to make its full service day before it has to go back in the yard. Hydrogen promises a little longer range. Those buses can go a full day, but on a per mile basis, that fuel is a lot more expensive. And there aren't as many offerings from vehicle manufacturers in hydrogen. It is a lot newer. So it's definitely something we're struggling with. We and all the agencies are part of California Transit Association. And we are, we have many of the same goals of wanting to improve air quality, but for sure, the electrification mandate has been a challenge on all of us. And it's a particularly challenging budget time. So I think, I don't know if I answered your question, but I think I commiserate with a lot of the sentiment there. I see a thank you from Jennifer at City of Sacramento. Thank you, Jennifer, for tuning in. Always appreciate the city's partnership on this, and Ride Free RT and Stockton BRT and so many projects every day out on the streets and roads and on the tracks. Question from Clyde. On an average weekly basis, how many people ride light rail versus bus service? We're a little interesting here in Sacramento in that we're just about 50-50. It's kind of unusual for a system like ours, a mid-sized city with light rail, for it to not be mostly bus with a little light rail. We're relatively speaking a very light rail heavy or light rail oriented system. That's always been a very important thing in our system design, because not all bus routes, but most bus routes have at least one connection with light rail. Light rail runs at 15 minutes or 30 minutes. So that really impacts how we do our scheduling, which is one of those things that our consultants are always helping us deal with. Question from Jeffrey, when will RT update guidelines for riders? Bike placement, strollers, scooters, probably a little outside the scope of this project. I mean, we are looking at, for sure, the customer environment, bus stops, shelters, those kinds of things. But guidelines for like bike placement and stuff is probably a little in the weeds for this project, honestly, Jeffrey. And I see another comment, Jeffrey, and I want to thank you, Jeffrey, for tuning in and always being a supporter of ours. Question on the new website, how do riders confirm when the bus will arrive at the bus stop? Explain the 1 to 3 bus arriving from bus due on the track. That's also probably a little outside our project, but I know our marketing and comms folks are on this call and are quite proud of the new, much more attractive webpage that's rolled out. But we are taking, questions, comments, and suggestions on slight modifications that most of you who are regular riders have probably noticed our new webpage. But if you haven't, we have a nice new webpage out there, much more visually attractive. I think I'm going to go now to the voice calls. And I think I was remiss to not mention kind of how this works. But for those of you on Zoom, I think that's most of you, we'll go in order that hands are up. We'll click a little button to allow folks to talk, and then you'll be able to speak. If you are calling in on a phone with a direct dial-in number, you can also make a request to speak. To do that, you just press *9 on your phone, and we'll see it as your hand raised. And then when you're top of the list, we'll call on you. We'll identify you by your phone number, which is all we can see. We'll use the last 4 digits of your phone number and call on you, and then we'll enable you to unmute, which you'll do by pressing *6, which I'll remind you guys of. But it's *9 if you want to put your hand up from a phone. But on the Zoom side, I think I'm going to go first to PJ, PJ, you had your hand up. Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, so I was wondering, do you look at anticipatory usage in the future after build out of service? So what you can expect once people start to understand that the transit is ubiquitous and that it's going to be available for them at all times, so they can kind of get out of the habit of thinking that their car is the only dependable option they have available to them. Basically, because right now I think there's a lot of perceptions out there about hassle, about the navigation being difficult, not knowing how the frequency, feeling safety issues, and basically that results in less usage of the system. And I think that it feels like once the usage, the build out occurs, then that's going to drive more people to use it, but it's going to take time. And I wonder if that's something that you approximate so that way people can understand it's going to take a few years of investment before actually people start showing up.
I can say from my side on the planning department, a lot of my focus is on ridership analysis. And we usually assume about 6 months for when we roll out a new route or we make a major service change. We usually figure it'll take about 6 months for ridership to materialize. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that just seems really short. Like I just, so I'm kind of surprised by that, but that's all. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's kind of an S curve, and
Okay.
there's research back in the 70s and stuff where they had economists statisticians do this stuff, and after 6 months you will still get some growth, but it's kind of a logarithmic thing where after 6 months you can usually tell about where it's going to end up. Thomas is saying I got it right here. Thank you for the question, though. I think I'll go next over to Glenn. Glenn, thank you for joining. Go ahead with your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello. Okay, great. So first, I wanted to say I very much like the overall tone of your presentation today, you and your team, because what I'm getting from it is there are some realistic circumstances we need to consider, and at the same time, you're open to possibility thinking. So that's what my question here is about concerning light rail. I originally wrote this, but I decided maybe it sounds better if I ask it. Oh, okay. So the basics of my question is first, how feasible would it be to implement express versions of Gold Line and Blue Line? And let me just explain why I've come up with this. So I'm many times attempting to persuade people to take light rail more often, and when they tell me why they're reluctant to, one frequent reason is that they just don't like how the trains stop at every station, so the trips take too long for them time-wise. And the thing is that they then counter immediately by saying, if there was a version of this that only stopped at major intersections, that would be very attractive, and they take it. So therefore, I'm asking you, like, using the equipment you have, could you make certain runs that only stop at major intersections? For example, Gold Express could have stops only at Sunrise, Wat Manlove, University 65th, 29th Street, and then maybe a few more. What are your thoughts on that?
Love the question, Glenn. And I saw Thomas nodding. I'll give a couple responses and then turn it over to Thomas to jump in too. I think I characterize it as something that's possible, but maybe more challenging than one would think at first blush. To take a step back, the SAC-RT system, that was modeled after systems in San Diego and originally in, Edmonton, Alberta, up in Canada. And all of these systems, they basically said, we want to have a subway. We want to have something like when BART came out. They said, we want something like that, but our city isn't that big. We can't justify something that expensive. It costs 10 times as much per mile to build subway or aerial systems that are completely grade separated, that have no intersections with cars at all. It costs 10 times as much per mile to do that. They said, why don't we model after the old streetcar systems or the streetcars or trams in Germany or Europe? 1/10 of the cost per mile, but a lot of the same benefits of a subway, which is, one person transporting 400 people, right? It's still very expensive to maintain track and overhead, but that's the basic economy of a light rail. But here and in those other cities we're modeled after, it really is what we'd call a street railway. And that's an important thing to remember. If you're on BART, you never cross a sidewalk. You never cross a city street. And when you go through a station, you're down in a cut. That's not how it is on our system. A lot of our stations are essentially plazas. We've raised the height of the station platforms, but the design is still more or less a plaza station where you take one step and you're on a track. You haven't fallen into the pit or touched the third rail. You're walking right across our tracks. Likewise, there's sidewalks and car crossings and everything. That means we can't just barrel through things at full speed. So, you can close a stop or a station here, but it doesn't mean we can go through that thing at speed. In all likelihood, we're going to have to slow down, it's still faster than stopping. But I'll just say it adds some complexity. And I could give a whole spiel on how our signaling works too. Those gates that come down that keep cars from driving across our tracks, those are all based on timing. And a lot of that, it's very safety sensitive. It's very expensive and time consuming to reprogram those things. It's not that it can't be done, but each one of those intersections is basically its own safety sensitive circuit diagram and timing thing. So what we have now with even 15-minute headways, that adds a lot of operational and design and maintenance simplicity, which is important on a street railway because we are trying to stay on time. We're trying to make connections with all those buses and a bus connection heavy system. And it's hard to keep a street railway on time because you have to deal with the unknown. All that's to say, it's complicated. And I could go on, but I want to turn it over to Thomas. He's smiling. He's telling me that's enough, James.
Yeah. No, there's a couple of things, and there are places in the United States that have tried to overlay express trains on top of normal trains without passing tracks. And they have typically been failures because it is difficult to do from a timing perspective. The other factor is that both the gold and the blue lines have single track segments that make this even more difficult, from a timing perspective. That being said, I think it's important to note, like one of the things that there's a subset of folks out there, not everyone, for whom speed is important. And if we really take a step back, speed is important for all of our customers. Nobody wants to spend more time traveling from point A to point B than they need to be. There are ways to improve the speed and reliability of the trains through better preemption at signals. And it doesn't mean that we need to skip stops. It's a matter of how do we stop at lights less frequently? And there are systems across the country that have significantly more signal preemption than SAC-RT does, so that there's less waiting at intersections, less waiting at lights, and trains moving faster and more reliably. So it's another way to approach this, but rather than skipping stops, why don't we speed up service for all of our customers and find those opportunities? That I believe is something that doesn't have the same, there's still challenges, but it's not as big of a challenge as trying to run express trains and local trains on the same track.
That response, Thomas, and I'm thinking of many of my conversations, but our rail operations and maintenance folks about slow orders we have in certain places. And there may be a solution to speed that train up, but it's a safety concern now. It needs alterations to how we do grade crossings, how and when we call on that crossing protection. A lot of stuff that's not necessarily glamorous, but that would both make the trip faster for our customers and make life easier for our people out there on the front lines. I want to go, it looks like that question was from Glenn. Let's go back to PJ for another question, and then we'll go to Charles and then Helen.
Oh, I didn't. I should have had my hand lowered. Sorry about that.
No problem. I'll jump over then to Charles. Charlie, welcome to the conversation.
Oh,
Good to
thanks
see you
very
or hear
much.
from you.
Thanks, James. This may not be exactly on point here, but it has been mentioned a couple of times today, and that has to do with the safety of riding both the long bus and light rail. And it was, I think it was Henry that said that, what we have here in Sacramento is pretty much one of the safest lines in the country. And from the data that I've seen, that's absolutely true. However, the perception of a lot of people out there is that it is unsafe, or people feel squeamish about getting on there because they're afraid. And so it would seem to me that there is some ridership to be had out there if the word can get out that, hey, this really is safe. And so I think there's a disparity between the perception and the actuality. I would just suggest that it could help ridership a lot if a big push was made to let people know, yeah, this really is safe.
I appreciate you sharing that, Charles. And, I think a lot of that is about spreading the word and kind of combating misinformation. I mean, if there's a perception they feel unsafe, I'm not going to, question anyone's right to feel that way. But, one fact that I always think of that I think isn't widely understood, and I'll separate, I guess, safety and security. Security we usually refer to more as like security from crime, safety more like a vehicle transportation kind of thing. And
Right.
on that front, I think a lot of people aren't aware, but once they hear it, it does make a lot of sense. Riding on a bus or a light rail train on a per mile or per hour basis is one of the safest ways to get around. If you think about it, you're on a large vehicle. If it gets in a collision, you're gonna be you're gonna come out better in that.
Right, you're
Um,
the big ship in the little boat ocean.
Yeah, statistically, the likelihood of major injuries and fatalities is so much lower on public transportation. It kind of makes sense, and I wouldn't begrudge anyone who feels discomfort or anything, but not everybody may think of that.
Right. My point was, I mean, that's a very good point, but a lot of people are afraid of being assaulted or being mugged or robbed or something like that. And as I say, I think the fact is different than the perception on that front.
Yeah, I think it's also true. When you're on public transportation, you are in the public. If you go downtown, you go to a large concert, you're also in the general public, and you're taking more personal risks than if you stay and eat at home. Sometimes I
Yes.
think transit takes a little bit of an unfair punch when something happens from that.
Agreed. Okay, well, thanks very much.
For sure. Yeah, thank you for adding, Charles. I'll go next to Helen. Helen, good to hear from you.
Hi, this is Helen O'Connell. I am glad that you guys have broadened the different ways to get transportation going way out into the West Bank, and then way over in the East Bank and all over the place by using rapid bus. And I think that is a very good option. But we also need the reliability, the maintenance, and extension of hours and service areas that have deserts. Because people that are transit dependent don't necessarily know where the deserts are. And they move there and they're like, where's the bus? So I think the number one priority for me would be get the desert service, even if it's just once an hour, but at least a bus is coming. And then my motto that I've had for decades, if there's a bus on Monday, there should be a bus on Sunday. So that's my input. Any thoughts?
Thank you, Helen. I'll maybe touch on that a little and add, right before the pandemic in 2018 and culminating in 2019, we did a project like this, but it was more of a kind of blank slate, new network, start from scratch. And of course, Helen, you were around then, but this was before the pandemic, but the trends in the industry already kind of were away from commuting and more towards 7-day a week service, away from traditional commute hours and downtown destinations, and more to crosstown and kind of intercity connections. And so our project then actually, what we really accomplished was to a considerable extent a reallocation of service from that traditional downtown commute focus to 7-day service. We beefed up our weekend service. We filled in gaps, and we said something that you said there kind of struck me, which is if it's worth running a 40-foot bus out there, it's worth running 7 days a week, and it's worth running from 7 a.m. hopefully till 9 p.m. and at least once an hour. What we really shot for in that project was to get to at least every 30 minutes. We'd love to have 15-minute frequent service in Sacramento, but like I said, we try to do what we can, the best we can with the funding we had. And the trend we saw, or the big need that emerged there, was really to kind of consolidate from like 45 routes, some of which didn't have any weekend service or hourly routes, down to a smaller nucleus of routes that ran 7 days a week mostly with 30-minute headways. And that ended up actually setting us up pretty well for the post-pandemic travel market, which is a big reason why right now we're not kind of doing like a start from scratch kind of blank slate approach.
I just think that if you're living in a bus desert, that means you can't get to the grocery store, you can't get to the hospitals. And if you're transit dependent, that is extremely important. So either we build stuff around our transit, or we build our transit around the areas that people need to get to. Just another thought. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Helen. And we're getting close to time. I think I see one more hand up from Robert. Robert, go ahead, sir. One last question here, if you have just a minute or so.
Hi, if we had a 0.5% sales tax increase, what can RT do with that?
Robert, did we lose you? Not hearing you, sir.
He just asked if RT had a 0.5-cent sales tax, what can we do with that?
Great question. Thank you. I think my internet cut out there, Thomas. And I'll say that's something we'll be looking at more when we get to the long range plan. We'll get more detail on that. For context, right now, Sacramento County has a 0.5-cent sales tax for transportation. SAC-RT gets around 1/3 of that. So you do the math, and that works out to about 1/5 or 1/6 of a cent that goes to us now. If a new 0.5-cent sales tax were to go on the ballot, we'd probably go with something where we get a fraction of that and some goes to general transportation. That's kind of outside the scope of the COA, but in the long range plan, we'll make some assumptions and try to pick like kind of a consensus number and budget around that.
James, let me just touch on that topic a little bit. Thank you, Robert, for asking such inspirational question. If we get 0.5-cent sales tax, so all those 5 or 6 top items, we just did a survey about 30 minutes ago, we will accomplish all of them. We will build 5 to 6 major BRTs in the major corridors of this whole region. We will increase our frequency to 15 minutes or even 10 minutes or less in the major bus routes. We will make sure provide service to more people, which right now they do not get the service. And definitely we will upgrade our bus stops and shelters, beautiful shelters. I promise you on that. And I particularly appreciate the comment from Charles about the safety and security, how we are going to address the perception issue. Thank you for asking that very critical question. And I'd love to chat with you individually, Charles, how you think about that. I feel you must have thought about that, how, have some very innovative answers or ideas how to enhance the perception. And we will try to address that issue. And state workers, which is a big part of our ridership portfolio, state workers, about 100,000 state workers, once they come back to work next month, then we have to provide more services to them too. But our primary concern still will be the transit dependent riders, and they account for about like 60 or 70% of our entire rideship. For example, some students, they totally depend on our service, and that's why with the right-free, RT students, right-free RT program, and the schools students' attendance rate increased significantly. So lots of great things we can do. Robert, thank you for asking that question, and thank lots of partners today asking some very, very interesting and thoughtful questions. Back to you, James.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. And yeah, I mean, I mentioned that the numbers on our game, it is a game, they're rough, but we tried to the extent possible to base this off of a 0.5-cent sales tax where we would get a fraction of it, kind of consistent to previous ballot measures that have been floated. So, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that these numbers are right down to the penny or proportionate. But we think this is a reasonable representation of the kind of trade-offs we'd have to make. So great question, Robert. Henry, loved it. Appreciate you jumping in. And it's been an enjoyable workshop, at least for me. I want to thank everyone for coming in, tuning in, listening, and hearing us tell our story and hearing a little bit about yours. Every time I do a project like this, it's always improved considerably by public input. So thank you. Please continue to tune in, follow along, check our emails, and spread the word. We love you and thank you for your support. That I think I'll close things up. Thank you, everyone.